Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Before we get into our second segment of the day here, I do want to remind you that if you wish to contribute and interact with our show a little bit more directly, consider making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. Great way as always to get your opinions on air. You can also do it through our website, gsmcpodcast.net if you so choose, but either way, it is greatly appreciated by all concerned at the network and just makes our shows that much better. So without further ado though, let us jump in right to our second segment of today's show, taking our final look at the waiver wire ahead of the fantasy playoffs. Now, these are truly some guys who have really come on these past couple of weeks and really proven that they can be hidden gems should you want to bolster your squad ahead of the fantasy playoff push. Now, these are all very risky players because of the lateness of their kind of reinvigoration, I should say. But I do feel like if you're in the fantasy playoffs, no matter how you got there, there's always room to add that one player who could be the difference down the stretch for you, because you don't want to leave it a chance. And even though, seeing as to how you're in the fantasy playoffs, you have a lot of good players there, maybe even some superstars, you'd always find one guy who you don't expect very often to carry you, but definitely could in these fantasy playoffs, and that could be all the difference that you need to win your league. So without further ado, let's talk about these certain players. Starting off with a young rookie in the New York system, New York Jets player. Very interesting career up to this point. Had basically not done anything for the first, 12, 13 weeks of the season. But these past two games, he's really come into his own, whether it be in the pass game, the short pass game, or the run game. And that is Isaiah Davis. He has scored 2 touchdowns in the past 2 games after scoring none over his first 13 or so career games. And that is truly remarkable for a Jets team that doesn't necessarily predicate itself on the run, but I would love to see more of that in this Jets team down the stretch, because they don't really have anything to play for right now. So why not develop certain players who you believe can be with you in the long run and really help you in this rebuild that you're going through, like an Isaiah Davis. That's why I feel like even though the Jets are the most appealing of fantasy teams at this point, mining them for young talent for your fantasy roster, for this fantasy playoff push, could be key, because I like what I've seen from Isaiah Davis as kind of this gadget player, short yardage situation back, and ultimately red zone threat these past couple of weeks. So that's why I'm really high on these low-end guys, maybe younger guys, in this fantasy playoff push than, say, some guys we've already talked about already, because these are now the guys who are really stepping into big roles for these moribund teams who can really help you, and that's why Isaiah Davis can top this list. Another guy who's actually helped this team a lot in situations such as these as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, with the frequent injuries to their 2 star receivers this season. How about Jalen McMillan? We've talked about him a little bit in terms of how that whole injury fallout befell the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over these past couple of weeks, but he's really come into his own, had a couple TDs in that game against Las Vegas, and really proven that he can carry the load. He's more of a short yardage guy, more of a route running guy, more often than not gonna beat you with his intelligence and savvy rather than speed and verticality, but he really is a very smart football player. And should the Bucs really want to make that playoff push, he's going to have to step up for them, and he's proven he can. So if Baker continues to trust him, then chances are his fantasy production is going to skyrocket these next couple of weeks in heading into the fantasy playoffs. So that's why Jalen McCormick finds himself on this list as someone who, as a young player again, who's actually played more significant minutes than potentially a guy like Isaiah Davis in this receiving role, knows what he has to do on the stretch. And that's something important, because if you're looking for waiver wire pickups, sometimes it's nice to mine these kind of terrible teams for talent here. But there are also teams who are trying to make that playoff push in real life who have players who might have to step up. And that's where Jalen McMillan falls. And so if you're more comfortable with taking someone who's proven in a playoff caliber system that he can step up and mature and develop, then I feel like Jalen McMillan could be a better decision for you, even though he's at a much tougher position from a fantasy perspective than Isaiah Davis. And that's just my opinion, because both of these players have really come into their own this season, whether it be in small sample sizes or a bit bigger. But ultimately, these are the two guys who I feel like are the best of this list. Not to say these other two guys can help you, but ultimately, these are the two guys who should define the waiver wire these next couple of weeks. And then, two other guys I want to talk about really quickly. The first one being the guy who really has no choice in terms of how much of the load he's going to have to carry in this really terrible Las Vegas offense, Sincere McCormick. You had injuries to both Madison and White, two guys who you really thought were going to step up in those roles. You have injuries to both Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell that are season-ending, and for the life of me, I don't know what Desmond Ridder is going to look like in this Las Vegas Raiders system down the stretch here. But if you really want to spoil some people's seasons, Sincere McCormick could be the best guy to do it. He's also a rookie here, really going to have to step up these next couple of weeks. Most importantly, try and play for his NFL future, really, because if they see something in him, potentially he could be elevated to RB1 next season for Las Vegas and really help this rebuild, should they draft a high-level QB in this coming draft. So that's why Sincere McCormick could be a really intriguing player to tap into as well. I mean, not so much so over guys like Davis and McMillan, who will look to have larger roles on this stretch. But if he does, then I do think that I feel like Sincere McCormick could be someone to look into. As Cam Daddy and as the Chad, welcome to the show, my man. I believe this is your first time commenting, asking about some advice for the postseason. He's asking about some tight ends specifically. Hunter Henry, Evan Engram, Ertz, and Kincaid. Rank them. Half PPR league. Also, who would you rather have for playoffs? So the way I see it, this is in terms of talent, in my opinion. Potentially not in terms of fantasy, because the tight end position has been really weird this year in terms of fantasy. No one really separating themselves, in my opinion, as a premier tight end, or in this kind of tier in my mind. No one's really elevated their status, so to speak. But if you just were to lay these tight ends out and ask me talent-wise who would be the best, I would say Kincaid is the best, but in terms of health, he might not be the best option for the playoffs, and that might be something you might have to monitor. Then I would say Zach Ertz, surprisingly, because this Washington Commanders offense really predicates itself on really getting Jaden Daniels to remain as efficient as possible. And Zach Ertz, even though he hasn't had the best of seasons, still can factor in on the stretch for this Commanders offense, just because of the fact that he can be an efficient route runner, especially in the red zone for a guy like Jaden Daniels. Then I'm going to say Hunter Henry, because he has truly been this New England Patriots offense these past couple of weeks. He has been one of their best pass catchers, but the fact of the matter is, I don't really know week in, week out what the Patriots are going to look like offensively, because Drake May is an excellent quarterback, no doubt about it, but if they end up passing so infrequently or too much, then that target share could get really weird in certain situations. And even though I love Hunter Henry and what he's doing for the Patriots, I don't really see him being efficient enough as well. Sad to learn also adds that TJ Hawkinson could be a nice little tight end for you in the fantasy playoffs. And then last but not least, Evan Engram will be the last guy on my list, because, let's be clear, I do think Evan Engram is the best route runner on the Jacksonville Jaguars. We see it when Trevor Lawrence is in there. He loves having a guy like Evan Engram. But the fact of the matter is, until this team really shapes up and really buys into the rebuild and accepts where they are, then I really don't know whether or not Evan Engram is even going to matter for this team going forward. And plus, he himself is also injury prone, so who knows there. But out of all these guys, in terms of playoffs, I would say Kincaid, just because of the fact he looks to be the most talented among this list, but Ertz is the safest bet because of the whole health situation. I hope this helps you. Good luck to you in your fantasy playoff exploits. Getting back into our final player here that you might want to look out for in the waiver wire. How about Jaylen Warren? I talk about the Steelers' running game a lot here, and I talk about Najee Harris a lot as well. But Jaylen Warren is a perfect complement to him. And if they want to lean a little bit more into the run game, the Steelers on the stretch, Jaylen Warren can do that in not just a chunk play kind of manner, but in more explosive manner as well. He can really be a threat in the open field, can really be a threat in the backfield as well. And so that's why I feel like Jaylen Warren could round out this waiver wire list. But then another comment from Captain Learn comes in here. Of Penix starts, watch out for hits to surprise. And this is talking about the Atlanta Falcons situation, and this will close the segment here. I feel like Michael Penix, I don't necessarily know if he should start, right? Because they are still in a situation where with Kirk Cousins, they can win this division. Yes, it's looking a bit more tenuous now. Yes, Cousins is not looking his best. He has thrown 0 touchdown passes in his past 4 games. But to turn to a draft pick who has, yes, a lot of college experience in his career, but A, is also injury prone, and B, is also old. And you don't necessarily want to waste a season here. Should you feel like Penix is the better option, stick with Kirk Cousins, because either way, it's the path of least resistance, and I feel like he deserves a chance to right the wrongs here, because he's still got them to this position where they control their own playoff destiny. And Penix, I don't know if you throw him into the fire, he can really help this squad. As much as I think that Penix is a very talented quarterback and he'll prove that, I don't necessarily know if asking him to go out and get them into the playoffs is really tenable here. And I feel like that's going to be the issue. But ultimately, Pitts is a guy who's been underwhelming this year anyway, so I wouldn't necessarily feel like, whether it's Penix or Cousins, that he would really be a surprise down the stretch here. But let me know what you think about these comments in the comments below. But coming up next, we continue our positional rankings for the running back position. Final positional rankings continue here for the regular season right after we come back from this short break.
Looking for